Let's look at this issue further now and speak to Trevor John. And please note, this is not his real name, and he's a human rights activist in Uganda. We also cannot show you his picture. This is to protect his identity. Thank you so much. And I do understand that we just lost Trevor John, but we're trying to get him back on the line. And of course, we talk about this bill and listening to what President Museveni has to say. He says that there are deviants from the normal, and saying that this is a provocation by the West. And this, of course, is a bill that, if you were listening to some of what came out here on the show, some of the MPs saying that they are preparing the way for the future of their children, and they want to make sure that things are done right in that country. But of course, there's been an international outcry for the president not to sign this particular bill into law, not to promulgate it. But of course, by all indications, some of those on the ground say that it may as well be a done deal. But let's speak now to Trevor John. Please do note, it's not his real name. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us here on the show. What is your reaction to the latest development?
It's so absurd that in 2023 we see a parliament that is not making legislation out of legality and constitutionality, but out of emotion and a less of understanding of people that they think should not exist. So as a Ugandan, as an activist, it was sad for me to see the Parliament of Uganda pass such a law that dictates for people to behave a certain way, and if they can't behave that way, then they should rot in jail or they should face a death penalty. I personally believe it's a law that is staged to wipe out gender and sexual minorities in Uganda, but also it impedes on LGBT persons' existence, organizing, and in general, all their constitutional rights.
And how do you feel about President Museveni describing, homosexual people, saying that they are deviants from the norm, and saying that this is a provocation from the West?
I think that it's African, and most African leaders have portrayed this for issues they don't understand. I feel that coming from a president of a country that should be encouraging diversity and us coexisting is really an insight of violence amongst the public that is embedded in culture and traditional norms and religious beliefs. We've seen that incidents like this from leaders of our country, as a reason public finds it easy and okay to violate LGBT persons, and we've seen no justice right now because of such kind of sentiment being shared by top leaders of government. For instance, our president, the deputy speaker, our speaker of parliament. So it's so absurd that such statements are inciting violence in our community.
And given what you've just described right now, how is the situation on the ground? What is the mood like?
A lot of LGBT people right now are in fear, including me. We are all in fear of the unknown. People are keeping in their houses with no help, because also the bill is looking at criminalizing people that are dead. So if someone gives you shelter, then they are abetting you as a homosexual person. So the climate is really poisonous as it is. People are in house. We've seen unlawful arrests of people, gay men and trans women were arrested under the pretext of homosexuality recruitment, and they've been remanded in police custody. We've seen a lot of evictions of LGBT persons from their rentals. There's been a lot of jobs because people are trying to keep indoors. We've seen a lot of mob justice. We've seen trans people being undressed and beaten and arrested and outed.
Yeah.
So,
pardon me for coming in there. When you talk about outed, and there's something else I want to ask you right at the back of that. We're seeing reports suggesting that there is now some individuals who are using this opportunity to blackmail, some and saying that they will out them if they do not pay a certain amount of money. Have you heard of that? Is it something that is happening on the ground?
So as the bill was tabled, we've seen a lot of blackmail coming up, and it's going to intensify with it now being an act of parliament and as awaiting for the president to assent to it. The fear of it all is that this act has been infiltrated into the general public, and people are using this to blackmail queer people, mostly trans women and trans men and gay men, because they take you at ransom. They tell you, if you can't give me money, then I'm going to out you, because the act as it reads allows one that is suspicious of your act as a homosexual to report, and actually criminalizes one that doesn't report. So people are using all these vague provisions in the act to blackmail and intimidate and threaten queer people in Uganda currently. So
in about 10 seconds before I let you go, are you hopeful that the president is not going to promulgate this bill, or do you think it's a done deal?
I am not hopeful, because we've seen him sign this bill in 2014 as a gift to Ugandans. I'm also not hopeful because if he doesn't assent to the bill in 30 days, he has to send it back to Parliament with comments on the reasons as to why he didn't sign it, and they will read it and answer or attempt to answer some of his comments and send it back. If he sends it back for the third time, then Parliament has a right under the Constitution to pass it as a law. So I am really less hopeful as a Ugandan, having watched the Parliament or our legislature being that, violent and passing a dangerous law that just shuts down a population in their country down. So I'm skeptical around what will happen, or if this law will not come to pass. Yeah.
All right. Please stay safe. Thank you so much for talking to us here on the show. That was Trevor John. Remember, we told you this is not his real name, and he's a human rights activist in Uganda, and we also could not show you his pictures just to protect his identity.